I'm Eric Newton, and this is The Together Show. We all know relationships take work, but what is that work, and how do we do it? As a former divorce lawyer, I've watched thousands of couples break up firsthand. Having seen the worst in relationships, I decided to try to help couples stay together. So on this show, we talk to real couples and find out what love really looks like.
Right? So many Christians are like, well, I'll give God, okay, God, if you can help me out with my finances and if you can help me out with my kids, that'd be great, but I'm going to handle everything that's going on in the bedroom. Well, when the bedroom's not working, maybe it's time that we as Christians said, hey, God.
Today's episode is sponsored by Little Bird, the independent diamond and engagement ring consultants. The best way to buy an engagement ring is with a bird's eye view. You can find them at littlebirdtoldyou.com. Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for listening. Today's episode is about sex in a Christian marriage. Now, you may recall that several episodes back, my guests shared they had managed to reignite the passion in their marriage following childbirth by using a technique that they had learned on a podcast called One Extraordinary Marriage. Well, I reached out to the hosts of that podcast, Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo, because I wanted to get the information straight from the source. Now, we don't agree on everything that we discuss in this episode, but we had a great time talking about it, and these two have some very useful insights about how to come to terms with sexuality in the Christian context. And since we don't have very many Christians or people from any religious bent on this show, I'm very excited about this one. So with that, let's go to our interview with Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo. Well, welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for having me over to your house. I love coming to people's houses because, you guys are personalities, but I get to actually see what it looks like in the true marital home. Yeah. With the Xbox sitting on the TV.
We have a teenager.
Oh, it's a teenager. Okay.
It's a teenager.
I was going to ask if that was a thing between the two of you.
No. Back in the day, we did do Naked Wii. But
we did do Naked Wii.
Naked Wii bowling.
Gosh, we got to do that again.
Wait, was that doesn't... it sounds kind of hot, but it also sounds floppy.
It was just an alternative date night type of idea where, we had the Wii system. I don't even think we have the Wii system anymore.
We don't.
But we had the Wii system and we're like, what can we do with this? Right? And, we used to play around with the kids dressed bowling, good, healthy family bowling. And then one night we're like, oh, the kids aren't gone. And it was just kind of a random thing.
It was pretty erotic, to be able to just sit there and, I'm on my couch and here's my wife just in her glory, just with a Wii controller in hand bowling. And I'm just like, that is just sexy as all get out.
Actually, it is. It is hot.
You know what I mean? It changes up that dynamic of are we really going to get real with each other and really let down the walls of who we are? And to do that in front of a game where you're just sort of having fun and your spouse is just sitting there watching you really opened up that world for us of wow, there's more to marriage than just having sex in our bedroom with the lights off.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about sex after a couple of years, isn't it? Because at the beginning, anybody can enjoy sex when the dopamine's pumping in the first 2 years of your honeymoon marriage, but it gets to a point where it's not so exciting. And from what I hear from couples who've been together 40 years and 30 years and 50 years is that it's about the intimacy, which means something, right? What does that mean to you? How did that transition for you?
Well, we definitely went through the roommate stage. And I would say, I'm not even sure we had 2 years of a honeymoon, exciting dopamine stage. I was like, really? There are couples that have that?
I don't know if we did.
That would have been exciting. Yeah. It just, for us, year 11 is the year that our marriage really transformed because we'd done the roommate thing. We'd done the little kid thing. We were deep in the trenches, even with the kids at 2 and 5. Mm-hmm. And maybe we were having sex once a month, maybe. If you were lucky.
If we were lucky.
I think if you were, at that point in time, it was if you were lucky.
True.
And we didn't have an emotional connection. That's when we did the 60 Days of Sex Challenge.
That's a challenge. I didn't know about that.
Oh, yeah. So year 11, things are just kind of, going through the motions. And we're leading a small group at our church on marriage. And Tony calls me one day and says, we should do a small group study on sex. We should talk about sex and intimacy. And
because I just felt that in the church setting, and we've been followers of Jesus since, 2000 now. And I had just felt like every time we did a small group study, it was on marriage.
Yeah.
And we would talk about marriage. We talk about the issues that a lot of marriages face, which would be finances, which would be the communication. And yet it would always come up to that edge of like, are we going to talk about sex?
And nobody wants to do it. They're so scared of it.
Nobody wants to talk about sex.
And particularly in the Christian community, right? Which is because the whole thing is sanctity of marriage.
Right. And so that's where we were. And I hit Alisa up and I said, if we're going to do something, let's talk about sex. Let's just do it and we'll go from there. And it was an amazing time.
But first I said no.
Right. Well, let's get back to the 60 days of sex. So we were gonna talk about sex.
Right.
We knew that. And then we had been watching, we were just in our room one night, some friends of ours' kids were on TV, and we happened to come across these two other couples though that had done sex challenges.
Which is what you did?
Multiple days of sex. So one couple
every single day.
She, for her husband's 40th birthday, wanted to give her a gift. Wanted to give him a gift that no one else could, so she gave him a year of sex.
Now, how many days they did in a year, they never say.
In their book, it's a little vague.
Yeah.
Well, okay. All right.
And then
so we don't, but still for that duration, pretty crazy.
Pretty big gift.
Yeah.
And then the other couple did 101 days of sex.
And they actually did 101 days of sex.
I mean,
a little unhealthy on that one.
Does it get to a point where it's, well, you'll tell me because you did 60 days of it.
Right? So he suggests 60, and my immediate reaction was no. Like, our kids were 2 and 5 at the time. I'm exhausted. We're juggling businesses. We're doing all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, there is just no way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sometimes need to put an exclamation point on things. So I went and put a green facial mask on, and it was just like, okay, let me come back to bed with this, neon green facial mask. Like, you're not even getting any tonight.
Did you do that on purpose, or was it unconscious?
I think it was an unconscious thing. I just think it was like I had to put distance there.
Yeah.
And that was a way to put distance.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just another rejection, which
was normal at that point.
Which was normal at that time. It was just sort of like, okay, I'm trying to reconnect with my wife. I want to be sexually intimate with her, and it got shut down again. And I learned something through the 60 Days of Sex Challenge, why that was happening, though.
Right, because the next day I'm standing, with a basket full of laundry, because like I said, the kids were 2 and 5, and I was perpetually doing laundry. And had that thought that, I call it my come to Jesus moment, where I was like, if I'm not even willing to try, we've been married 11 years. If I'm not even willing to try and have sex with him for 60 days, then it's probably over. Like, there's probably nothing worth working on in my marriage, because I'm not even engaged. I'm not even willing to try.
I love that you're so honest about that, but you had just stuck it out for 11 years. I mean, that's not nothing. You stuck it out for 11 years with mediocre sex. Why did you have that realization then? Because
mediocre sex is not what we were designed for. Yeah. Right? That's not what a relationship, you're not designed to be mediocre.
Right. Even in your relationship, be it having sex or not having sex, don't you want to live something that it's extraordinary? If we said on our wedding day that we were going to love each other and hold each other and be with each other until death do us part, are we going to just roll through life just sort of in mediocrity?
Well, that's your answer now. And that's certainly, I think, the standard male response. Mm-hmm. But for a mom who's got a 2 and a 5-year-old who hadn't had this realization yet, you probably thought that was okay or normal,
it had become our normal. I didn't know any better. That you see on Hollywood and just these amazing love stories, and you see everything, and we didn't even have social media. Social media didn't exist when we got married. We've been married 20 years now, and social media, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no Pinterest, which is probably a good thing. Right. But, we didn't have all that. I just knew that this was my marriage.
Yeah.
And yet there was always this lack of, well, is this as good as it, really? This is as good as it gets?
You did feel that.
There was that sense that there had to be something better, that there was this huge disconnect. I knew we were disconnected. It was obvious in how we didn't have deep conversations anymore. We didn't really enjoy spending time together. Our entire lives at that point in time revolved around our children and business. And so it wasn't it wasn't like there was anything deep between the two of us.
Yeah.
And that was just it was a really crappy place to be.
I think we were at that point where we've said it many a times that either A, we would just stick it out until the kids were 18 and most likely get a divorce then.
Yeah.
Just be roommates and just succumb to that and just be like, all right, we'll just be roommate type. And we'll deal and we'll put on our happy face when we need to, or just get a divorce.
Yeah.
And actually, the divorce is after the 18 or the last one is get radical. Right.
Which is what you did do.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what we did. And we decided to do together was get radical. That was Alisa really coming forward though and going, you know what? It was more her than me.
Yeah.
Me, it was let's try and do something, which was a 60 Days of Sex challenge. Her, it was the realization that, yeah, we need to do something. We need to get radical because if we don't,
we're going to get dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think we would have made it to 20. I mean, we just celebrated 20 years. I don't think we would have made it to 20 if we hadn't gotten radical, because we need that physical connection.
Yeah.
We need to express desire to one another. It's so important. For the first 11, 12 years of our marriage, I very much sat in the role of, Tony, you go and pursue me, and I'll be the gatekeeper. I'll decide when we have sex.
Yeah, it gives you power.
Total power, right? And so Tony spent probably the majority, probably 95% of the time in that first 12 years.
95. What? More like 99% of the time.
What did I say?
95.
Okay, 99.
I think you're giving yourself a little bit of leeway there.
We'll go with your number because it's probably more accurate.
Yeah.
But 99% of the time being rejected because I was tired, because the kids were up, because we had to go here, because.
Yeah.
Right.
And so one of the things that we discovered in our marriage during that 60 Days of Sex challenge was how much I had used rejection in our marriage dynamic, and how damaging the rejection became to Tony as a man, how much it impacted him in all areas of his life, not just in our marriage, but now it's no joke. He leaves, to go out and see clients, and I'm like, honey, go slay the dragon. Right. And that's just something that we say between the two of us, because I just see him now with this confidence, because rejection is no longer an issue in our bedroom.
Right.
We've created an environment there where we're both willing, where we both actively try, where we both initiate, where we're both intentional about it. I mean, I work with couples all the time, coaching them where, just because of the story that you've written for yourself, of the stories that you've told yourself, that's in the past. It doesn't have to be your future.
Right.
Change. I mean, we're living testimony to the fact that change is possible.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big things that we learned through that 60 Days of Sex challenge, and with many of the couples that we deal with and talk to, is that the emotional intimacy is lacking. Mm-hmm. And so that may have happened. Like, it just didn't work. Well, why is that? Did they shut down? Did they ever talk about it? Did they really open up and share what was happening? One thing that we learned through the 60 Days of Sex challenge for myself was that Alisa really had to just brain dump prior to having sex. She needed to get these words out. She needed to get everything out of her mind so she could fully engage with the actual act of sex. I had no clue about that in the first 11 years or before doing the 60 Days of Sex challenge.
You would have never known that.
Right. And so there were times during that 60 days where, we would start getting into the foreplay, and she would just start talking, and I would try to rush it. And then I realized was that she needed to release all this. And as we began to discover through the 60 days and years after, it just allowed her to be in a mental place where she could fully be engaged with me and the foreplay and the sexual act.
It sounds like the talking wasn't the foreplay, as a lot of people often say, but it was more the preparation for the foreplay, so that you could then...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot to be learned in being able to listen to your partner, because it goes both ways. I mean, there are just times when Tony, I obviously use more words, but there are times when Tony needs to talk, and just having that emotional connection. It's amazing how if you feel emotionally safe and in a place where you can be emotionally vulnerable, it's a lot easier to get physically naked.
Well, and it was our 20th anniversary last week. We celebrated, and we have this great resource called 19 Amazing Questions.
19 Questions to Amazing Sex.
19 Questions to Amazing Sex. And we hadn't gone over this in a while. And it's just 19 questions about sex
that you should ask your partner.
Uh-huh.
And they ask you, and it's just a conversation piece because folks are not asking these questions. So they
don't know what to ask. People don't even know where to start.
Right. Because it's like, this is a little weird. And do we ask about this? Well, and so Alisa and I are talking, and here we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. And we're driving back down the coast from Laguna Beach, and we're asking and answering these questions. And we're in a good spot. And yet we learn some new things about each other. And at the same time, oh my gosh, you want to talk about massive foreplay and desire. And I mean, we were just like, okay.
Because of the questions.
Oh,
because of having the conversation, because, even at 20 years, we're still learning new things about each other.
Yeah. And because we're changing.
We're changing.
We're in our early 40s now. We're not in our early 20s when we got married or 30s, with little kids around anymore.
You're willing to do naked wee? Why not?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
That's so great. Okay. What were you going to say?
No, it just, having that emotional intimacy, having that time together, and being able to talk about the tough topics. I mean, sex is a really tough topic.
Yeah.
Because so many couples expect, here we have this fabulous day. We get to wear the pretty dress and the fabulous tuxedo. We've got the right colors and the right cake, and everybody's there. And then the next day, we're married. And everything should just work.
Right. That's the assumption.
That's
right.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's happily ever after. And the truth is that the next day you're living with this person. Even if you lived together before, there's a shift in the dynamic when you get married, and you have to learn about the other person. And it's not just a one-time thing. It's a daily.
And it's not just sex, but it is sex.
Correct.
It includes that.
Yes.
Along with everything else.
And if you add financial stress on top of it, or job changes, or starting a new business, or adding or kids, different travel schedules, all of that starts to play into it.
Well, all right. So I want to know, I want to ask about kids. And let me, as a segue to that, tell me when you first started the 60-day challenge, what was it actually like? I mean, did you have to just force yourself, like taking medicine sometimes?
No, actually, the beginning, I've often said, and keep in mind at this point in time, 11 years ago when we started this, I was the one that was the gatekeeper and most often saying no. Right. The first probably 3 weeks, it was like being on our honeymoon, but better because we'd had all this years of experience. So we kind of had an idea of how everything worked. But it was like, I'd be calling him up, like, what time are you coming home? When are you going to be home? I can't wait to see you, all of this kind of stuff. And so he actually, can I share that? Well, I'm going to share.
You're going to have to. You brought it up.
Day nine. I remember day 9 because day 9, we're getting ready for bed and we hadn't had sex yet that day. And Tony's like, can we just take a little break?
One day.
And I'm like, day 9? Really?
I thought we got to 11 though. We did 11.
I think you hope it was 11, but I'm pretty sure it was day 9. And so Tony begged off first.
Yeah,
and so we took a break and that was fine. But it was because the communication was there. And I did have that, wow, can you get too much of a good thing?
Well, you're athletes, you gotta work up to it.
It's an endurance race. Right. So the first 3 weeks were really amazing.
But wait, you did take off day 9?
We did.
Yeah, so we did 9 days in a row, and then we took off a day.
So it's kind of 59 days.
Well, we ended up completing 40 out of the 60. So it was over a 60-day period, and we completed 40 out of 60 because week 4.
Well, in the way we set that up was that travel, her monthly cycle, or sickness. Those were off days.
So monthly cycle are off days for you guys?
Yes. They are off days for us.
Yeah.
But you don't think that's supposed to, that's just what works for you guys?
That's exactly. We know lots of couples that it's all good for them to have sex during the monthly cycle, and more power to it. For me, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. So week 4, I get my period, Tony gets a viral migraine, and both of our kids get sick.
Yeah.
All smack dab in the middle. So he's in urgent care, head pounding, all kinds of stuff. I've got kids that aren't sleeping through the night. I've got my period, and I'm just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right? I'm done. I did it. That's good. And so everybody gets healthy. My period's over, and Tony's like sidling up to me in bed, and he's like, we're all good. And I'm just laying there going, no, we're not all good. Like, I don't want to. And yet in the back of my mind is I made a commitment to this. We said 60 days. We said we were going to block off this 2-month period.
But you could have made an excuse that night again, because I mean,
sure.
you had just come through a period where legitimate excuses were being used.
Right. I mean, I could have come up with all kinds of stuff, and I think he would have. I think he would have accepted it. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, no. But you said you were going to do. Like, are you really going to give up? So there's a whole wrestling things going on of you don't really want to. You're tired. And on the other side, it's like the angel and devil on my shoulders, and the angel saying, "But you made a commitment.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?" And so in that moment, honestly, I prayed. I'm like, "Okay, God, like I got nothing here. If you're gonna, like, if I'm gonna honor this commitment, it's gonna be you." And so,
wait. So how long did it take to pray and do all that?
It wasn't long. I mean, it was still kind of in that foreplay moment.
Because I can imagine if he's saying, "Hey, let's do this," and you're praying, he's thinking, "She's not into it. I'm getting rejected. Fine, I still love her. I'm going to sleep."
Yeah, it's been interesting because I didn't tell him until after we had sex, because we did end up having sex that night. Like, it was all good. Arousal came back, and after, like, I'm all cuddled up, and I'm like, "I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way." Which is
the greatest lead-in ever.
That's and
so your heart starts pounding.
You're like, geez,
what are we going?
We just had sex. Like, what are you going to tell me?
You're just like, I'm just in this nice afterglow. What are you doing?
And so, it's just
let me enjoy my cuddle time.
Let me enjoy my cuddle. No, I was like, I got to tell you, and he said, "Tell me what." You can just hear this is going to be bad. And so I said, I prayed for arousal. I prayed, and then he was like, "Oh, well, you should do that more often." Right? Like, if that's all it's going to take,
God can bring it.
Then do it more often. And that was one of those turning points for our marriage, for our sexual intimacy, and just for our lives. That, there are going to be those times when we don't necessarily want to do something. It's like I tell my kids, there are times when you have to do stuff you don't want to do.
Right.
Same thing in marriage. There are times I have to do stuff. Like times I have to. We do things together where I'm like, not really what I'm looking to do today, but this is what you want to do.
And here's the thing that we began to learn through that 60 days. We had a lot of sex, 40 times in 60 days.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
For most marriages, they're doing maybe...
That's a year's worth.
Yeah. If that.
You think so statistically? That's a year's worth for most marriages?
Most marriages are what, 2 to 3 times a month?
Is that really the numbers?
It's all over the. I mean, you can find statistics to back up anything you want.
Yeah, who knows?
But yeah, on average, maybe 3 to 4 times. A month.
So you're talking. Most couples are having sex 36 to 48 times a year.
Yeah,
we had sex 48 times or 40 times in 2 months. So we learned a lot, and we learned a lot about how to communicate with that and growing from there. And so it's a learned process, just like anything else you're doing. You're constantly learning, you're exploring, you're trying things that work, that don't work. And that allowed us to really jumpstart that physical connection that we never had in the first 11 years. And Alisa and I say it all the time on our show. We are having the best sex of our lives now than when
in our 20s. Ever. Yeah.
Well, okay. Then that makes me wonder what happens after, because a lot of people will get on a new exercise kick or a new diet, or they'll start working on a new business project, and they can carry it for 30 or 60 days, and maybe they learn something about themselves, but then it falls off.
Right.
And none of us want to equate sex to those things, but
it's true.
But it's true. So what happened? I mean, were you able to carry it through?
So here's what we ended up doing. So we did the 60 days. We took a break. We needed a break.
Yeah.
And yet we knew...
How long?
It was probably about a month.
Of no sex?
I know we had sex during that month, but we said we're going to take this month and we're just going to let it be, kind of more organic or, spontaneous, I guess would be a better word.
Yeah.
Just not going to plan it like every day or every 2 days or whatever it was.
So we took a month. And then through that, though, we realized, wow, this was pretty amazing. So what are we going to do? How do we keep this going? Because it's exactly what you're saying. Hey, anybody can do something for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then it sort of rolls. So 2 things that we began to implement. One, we realized that 60 days is a long time.
Yeah.
And we still wanted to do these challenges because it brings a dynamic of the marriage of, we're in this together. Like we're attacking a goal together. So we began the 7 Days of Sex Challenge. And we realized that in 7 days, you can really get all the benefits that we did in 60 days. You really can.
In 7?
In 7.
Okay.
What we do after that, though, is what we started, and that's called the intimacy lifestyle. And that, honestly, that's the backbone to how we're able to continue to enjoy sex and that physical connection like we do now. And so that's the bigger piece, because we realize like we couldn't continue on with like, oh, let's do a 60 Days of Sex Challenge here, and then 3 months later do it again. What's that rhythm that we can have in our lives that allows us to keep the sexual intimacy going?
Well, you use this phrase, we're attacking a challenge together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is the challenge sex, or is the challenge intimacy, or is it something else?
I think it's different for every couple. For us, it was the challenge of being able to complete the 7 days. For me,
it's, you know what? It's varied over the years. We've actually
true.
done 8 7 day challenges.
We've done 8 now. Yeah.
So we did the 60-day challenge, and then since then we've done 8 7-day
days.
challenges. And sometimes it is, like, let's just have sex for 7 days in a row.
Yeah.
Right? And other times it's, we need to focus on our intimacy. That emotional connection, but we do it, the vehicle that we use in that particular space is sex, because we know that if we're going to be having sex every day, there's a lot of stuff that has to go into play for us to be in a place where we can both come together and have sex. We have to, like, it's not going to matter who's taking out the garbage. The garbage just has to go out, right? Or who has to make dinner, or who has to do the dishes. Let's just make the household run so that we're both in a good frame of mind. And so it's an opportunity for us to come together to really focus on each other.
What's the bigger picture in marriage? I mean, I assume you do sex and you do intimacy and you do chores and you do
we do life,
for something.
The bigger picture is creating an extraordinary life together. For us, we had all of those years where it wasn't just the sex was mediocre. Our marriage was mediocre.
Yeah.
Right.
There wasn't, we had 2 kids, and we had a business. There were things that were happening that from the outside looking in, people would be like, hey, you guys are doing well, house, business, kids, all this kind of stuff. Okay, sure. But inside the 4 walls, not so much.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are living that. And so when we took on that 60 Days of Sex Challenge, really it started out being about the sex, but the conversations, the emotional intimacy that developed, the recreational, we started enjoying doing things together again. We really dug into our finances and got on the same page as far as that. So it became this vehicle that while it started out as sex, and we tell people this all the time, it started out as just about the sex. What it evolved into was a way to do marriage.
Yeah.
Was a way to say, okay, you know what? If we can get intentional about one area and see this kind of impact, what happens if we got intentional about this thing called marriage? Mm-hmm. What would change if we said, you know what, we're going to be intentional about how we, handle our finances. We're going to be intentional about how we spend our time. We're going to be intentional about how we raise our kids. And all of a sudden, we're not reacting to life. We're being proactive in our lives. And that's where the shift happens. That's how we take on challenges together and get on the same team, and not have it just be like, well, Tony's going to go do his thing and Lisa's going to go do her thing. And, maybe we'll meet up in bed. On Thursday.
Which is what starts to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so last question before we take a break. I think there's a way that a lot of people want their sex life to go, which is that it just happens and it's just perfect. It just arises spontaneously. We're so passionate about each other. We're so in love.
Yes.
We come home, she walks through the door and I just devour her, in the moment.
And she's naked in high heels.
With the martini or whatever,
Yeah.
And I think that does...
I love that.
Right? And it does happen sometimes, but it's the way that we're used to it happening when we're young and dating, because that's... Right, that's how it goes when you're young and dating. But then when you're married, maybe it only happens occasionally, and then so you have to structure the way you guys are talking. But I'm imagining younger people listening to the show going, "That's just so dead and lifeless." Do you have a response to that concern?
Oh, well, the spontaneity question's my favorite.
It is.
It's one of my favorites, because Hollywood has really given us this blueprint for what spontaneity looks like, right? Like, you know, the violins are playing and there's the rose petals on the bed and she looks perfect and he looks perfect and their eyes meet.
Perfect.
And my response to that is, if you had a cast and crew of 100 people, you would always have the most amazing spontaneous sex. All the
Always.
time.
In public.
Always. Well, yeah, in public. You know, the truth of the matter is that, you know, whether you're in your 20s or you're in your 70s, we pretty much all live and die by our calendars, right? You know, us doing this interview, it was on the calendar. It had to be scheduled. We're still having incredible spontaneous conversation and all of this is happening, but there had to be a structure on the front end. And for people that are afraid of putting a little bit of structure, and that's really our intimacy lifestyle is just a little bit of structure. Like, we know during the week, and Tony didn't explain this, but the way we've structured it is there are 3 days a week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, that Tony has the privilege to initiate. I have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that I have the privilege to initiate. Saturday for us is an off day or a bonus day. So when it's my days to initiate, I'm like looking at what we have going on in those 3 days, going, when is going to be the most opportune time? Because Tony's not going to say no, but let me be forward thinking. So the structure is, these are my days, but the spontaneity is, he doesn't know if I'm going to walk into the bedroom naked. He doesn't know if I'm going to send him a text saying, hey, you and me tonight. He doesn't know if...
You're getting me aroused right now just as you talk, baby doll.
Well, you know, this is the kind of thing that happens. Not my day. We're recording on a Monday.
Jeez.
But, you know, so he doesn't know these things. So there's still spontaneity built into it. And I want people to have creativity and spontaneity, but we've got to be intentional about making that happen.
And that's the distinction. Intentionality versus spontaneity, whatever the heck that means.
Even couples who don't have kids need to be intentional.
Yeah.
Because we were there too. We didn't have kids. We didn't have kids for the first 6 years of our marriage. And guess what? You can fall into a rut pretty quick between just working, maybe your activities, going to church, you know, just plopping down, watching TV. We hear it. I hear it from guys all the time. You know, they have no kids and they come home from work and they just plop down on the TV and they're wondering why they're not having this life, this marriage that they desired. I'm thinking, well, dude, like,
because you popped a Budweiser and started watching sports, you got to be a little bit more intentional.
There's no romance.
Yeah, I'm like, why don't you start romancing your spouse a little bit, man? Instead of plopping down, just Alisa and I, for us, we enjoy our walk and talks, and so we'll try to get out twice a week. We've been a little busy recently, and go for half an hour. And it's just a walk and talk. We're out, we're walking, we're moving.
You're connecting.
We're connecting. It's not this eye to eye, you know, like, ooh, I got to like look at her eyes and dig deep. We're just moving and we're talking about life and what's happening in our lives.
Yeah.
And so, you know, doing things like that allow us to grow and just enjoy these years.
Well, that's a good point to take a break. So, as a way to get into the break, tell us the name of your website so that people can go check you out if they want to.
Yeah, go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com.
Oh, that's
and
easy.
Yeah, oneextraordinarymarriage.com. And you can learn about who we are even more. We have all of our shows, over 300 shows now. We've been podcasting for close to 7 years at this point.
It's crazy.
We have numerous articles from communication to sex to trust, and much more there that anybody can just start diving in and learning.
Great. Awesome. Okay, and we'll be right back with more questions about sex after kids, which I'm very curious about, and conflict in general. Today's episode is sponsored by Little Bird, the independent diamond and engagement ring experts. If you're getting married, the truth is that your engagement ring is likely to be one of the more expensive purchases that you ever make. And it's a tough one to make. How do you choose? Where do you go for reliable information about diamonds? Do you even want a diamond? And how do you keep from getting ripped off? Now, you can probably get up to speed on all of these issues by yourself because there is an immense amount of information on the internet. But that takes time, and time is valuable. And that's where Little Bird comes in. I vetted Danielle, the owner, myself, and I can tell you that not only is she good people, she really knows her stuff. Little Bird takes you through a process that helps you to find a ring that matches your personality and has lasting impact. They charge a flat fee for their services, and the odds are you're going to save more on the ring by working with them than they charge in the first place. So give Little Bird a call for a free consult. There's no harm, and you're going to learn a ton. And you can find their website at littlebirdtoldyou.com. And remember, the best way to buy an engagement ring is with a bird's eye view. All right, welcome back. I'm sitting here with Tony and Alisa DiLorenzo, and we've been talking about sex and intimacy in marriage and how to make that be, how to be intentional about it.
Absolutely.
Right? And so now this was coincidental, but I didn't know what you two were up to. Somebody had suggested that I interview you on the show.
Oh, cool.
And then a couple of days later, one of my listeners emailed me and said, I'd like to hear what your guests have to say about sex after kids, because we're not having it, and he wants it and I don't.
Right.
And so it turns into a fight. And then a couple days later, I interviewed Jessica and Jamie Rhodes, who are podcast professionals, and they have a podcast about podcasting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
we know Jessica.
Oh, yeah, we know Jessica.
Yeah, you
Rhodes.
guys-
I love
yeah.
Jessica. Yeah, she's great.
And I asked them the question about sex after kids, and they gave me an answer. And I said, well, where'd you learn that? And they said, we learned it. You hear this coming from Tony and Alisa.
Nice.
And so I think you probably have a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
Sex after kids is a thing.
It is a thing.
As a divorce lawyer, we used to refer to the first few years after childbirth as the zombie years, because you're not getting any sleep and you're not having any intimacy, probably, usually, and the sex is down. And Jessica and Jamie said it took about 4 years for sexuality and intimacy, with sexuality to kick back in. And this is when a lot of couples get divorced. So what do you two say to that? I mean, what do you do?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to hear that other people are talking about us on on your show as they're coming to you and saying, "Oh, well, we heard about this from Tony and Alisa." We lived the zombie years.
Yeah.
For sure.
11.
Well, yeah, ours kind of got extended because it took us 6 years to have kids. So the first 6 were not so good and
5.
on their own without children. And then, we had
5.
those 5, whichever, I can't do the math,
Right.
when we had kids that were little. And it is real. And what we didn't know, and one of the things that we talk about with couples all the time, is that you've got to get intentional about romancing each other from literally from the point of conception. I mean, you're already doing it prior to conception, right? Like that's how you're making the babies, but throughout the pregnancy, and even being intentional on what that looks like after baby comes, because it's so easy when your firstborn comes, and this was like the number one mistake. I mean, we completely revolved our world around him. I didn't want to leave him with anybody.
Right.
I was breastfeeding and he was a hungry child. So it was like perpetual. Like there were nights where I'm just like, oh my gosh, please stop eating. Because he wanted to eat all the time. And so I'm not getting any sleep. And if I'm not getting any sleep, then we're not having any intimacy because I'm just like, I got nothing to give.
And your body's not feeling like a sex machine, I would imagine,
No.
because you're a food making machine.
You're a food making machine.
And you maybe don't like your body at that stage.
You're all
either.
squishy in places that you weren't squishy before. You're just kind of like, what is this thing? Right? Yeah. Like it used to be. Like I remember what it looked like when we made the baby. What happened?
Yeah.
And you know what happened, but mentally you're just kind of like, I want that body.
Yeah.
And so when we finally got to the point where we left Alex, it was like, I remember we've got pictures, and the pictures are just, they're awful. Like when we went to San Diego, we just stayed down for a night, and you took this picture of me. Tony's looking at me like, I don't remember, but he took this, and I just looked so washed out and just so like exhausted. And I'm thinking, why would he want to have sex with me? Right. And so now what we learned going through this process, even developing the intimacy lifestyle, because we started that when the kids were 2 and 5. So still kind of in that zombie. Mm-hmm. I love that phrase, the zombie years. In that phase is we had to get intentional. We had to take advantage of nap time, right? Because when they're napping during the day, you're most likely awake.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking, oh, well, this is a great time to get the grocery shopping done. Like you stay home, I'm going to go do the groceries, or this is a great time to clean the house or do the laundry or do all this other kind of stuff. And my response to that is that stuff is always going to be there, right? If you have kids, you're always going to have laundry and you're always going to need to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
The relationship between the two of you has got to take priority. You've got to take advantage of nap time. You've got to take advantage of them being at their friend's house. You've got to create date night opportunities that are more than just our favorite dinner and a movie.
Right.
Like that is not a date. That's just dinner and a movie.
You know, I've never been in this situation, so for me, it's an abstraction to imagine what a mom or a dad might be saying in that phase. But I think I've heard enough of my clients who got divorced during that. to imagine that some moms might say something like, he just needs to love me, and we're just not going to have sex, and it might be a year, and I don't know how long it's going to be, because I need to take care of this child, and I need to take care of my body. I need to be authentic and true to myself, and if he really loves me, he'll push through it. What would you say to that?
Ooh, that's a big one. Like, he's just going to push through it. I think there needs to be a better understanding of what that means. Honestly, because what does that like mean? Like, push through what? What is it? Am I waiting for 6 months, a year, 2 years? And if that's the case, then can we begin that dialogue so that way we can be connecting somewhere else? Because I feel like when that's said, then all communication begins to stop as well. And so the emotional intimacy dies. So you want me to love you, and yet we're not having any emotional connection. We're not having any physical touch.
Yeah.
So there's this piece of me that's just going, it's ambiguous. I'm dying because we had sex prior.
Yeah.
And so...
Okay, so I can imagine her... You have something to say, at least, but let me...
I'll hold it.
So I can imagine her saying, no. I'll play the woman here. No. We can have intimacy and we can have communication, but I just don't know when we're going to have sex. It might be... I don't know how long. It might be a year. We can talk. We can hold hands, but just sex has to be off the table. And I'm going to be a little grumpy.
I'm going to be a little grumpy.
At that point in time, as a husband, I'm saying, honey, we need to go see a marriage coach, because I don't know the words to use, and I'm not equipped to walk through this without a third party helping us through.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to get frustrated.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be good for you, and it's not going to be good for me. So let's go get a marriage coach.
Yeah.
If even for, 1 session, 5 sessions, 2 months, whatever it may be, so that way we can be walking through this together and so we can both better understand what this looks like moving forward.
Okay, I like that, but now let me make this difficult.
Yeah, go for it.
So then she says, well, no. Now you're forcing your agenda on me, and you're trying to bring in a third party who's going to force this male agenda, or in our case, it's a male agenda, to have sex. And what I'm saying is I need space, and I want you to love me for who I am.
Okay, I have to ask the question. I have to jump in. Why is sex being used as the weapon? Why is sex the thing that she's withdrawing from? Because here's the thing. You wanted him. You needed him to make that baby. Yeah. So why are you saying, now that I've got this child, I don't need you? And maybe she's not saying that, but that's what he's hearing. I don't need you. This other human being that it took 2 of us to create, or if they went through the adoption process, 2 of us to adopt, whatever the situation is that you made this child come into your family. Why is this person now completely replaced me? Why is this person more important than me? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we as parents, our job is to create human beings that will grow up and leave our homes, right? So if our job is to create independent beings who go out and become productive members of society and don't live in our home forever and ever, then what are we going to have in 18 or 20 years if we don't focus on strengthening this relationship? Because you can give me the Heisman all you want, but if we don't work on us, we're not going to be around in 18 or 20 years. We're not going to be that family unit that raises this child. They're going to be splitting their time between your house and my house.
Well, what if she says it's just my body? My body's just not ready.
Then she needs to also be involved in the process of getting her body ready. And because sometimes I think a lot of women are like, oh, I've put on a few extra pounds, or I'm not ready. Well, what are you doing to be proactive
to get there? And
what environment is being created in the marriage where romance is still happening, where maybe it's not sex, but what other type of sexual touch are you willing to engage in? Like maybe it's actual sexual intercourse that's still painful. I mean, I remember was it with Alex, with our first, where you like wanted to jump right back in the minute I got clearance, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. You know, our firstborn, and he's like, all right, the doctor said you're good to go. And I'm thinking, well, I'm glad that medically I'm good to go.
And I don't know if the doctor was a man, but I'm imagining you could be saying he's also, right?
Well, yeah. The first time around, it was actually a woman. But it was a woman. But it was a woman. But yes, my second one was a man. And so that could very well have been the case. So, you know, it's understanding, okay, medically, she may not be ready. I mean, C-sections and, you know, episiotomy, all of this kind of stuff happens and the body doesn't feel the same way. So, okay, so we can't have sexual intercourse, or you're not ready for sexual intercourse. How can we, you know, will you cuddle naked with me? Can we, you know, do mutual masturbation? Can we do these different types of things so that, you know, we're still connecting on that level?
Yeah.
But it's not sex.
Yeah.
You know, let's open up that again. That's where
it's not intercourse.
It's not intercourse. Again, that goes back to the fact that so many couples aren't talking about sex. They just, you know, it becomes, well, we're not going to have sex. Well, that's kind of like very black and white.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is what you guys are saying, is at least just talk about it.
Yeah.
At least have the intimacy of the conversation. And then that opens up the door to my next question, which is there might not be an answer to this. Is there a way to know what is enough in terms of frequency at that phase? I mean, it's going to be different for every couple.
It is. And every couple needs to walk through that. Even when we do our intimacy lifestyle and we talk about this with the one family, what Alisa and I do works for us. Yeah. 2 times a week works for us. We know when she has her period, we're not having sex in that middle section where she's the heaviest. That works for us. If for you it's 1 time a week, then go for it. If for you it's once every other day, 3 times a week.
Well, but that's going to be the question, because if it's for her, it's once a month, and for him, it's 3 times a week. Then
that's where the dialogue starts. That's the beginning.
Right. That's not the end. That's where
That's not saying, well, we're only going to do it on the low end, or we're only going to do it on the high end. It's saying, okay, well, where can we both? You know, if he wants to have sex 3 times a week, that works out to be 12 times a month, and she wants to have it once a week, which is 4 times a month. So we've got a difference of 4 and 12.
Yeah.
Could we meet at 6 or 8?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe it's twice a week instead of 3 times a week, or
maybe it's different kinds of sex, and maybe even just talking about it creates the intimacy, and maybe it's not orgasm, but it's, who knows?
Oh, we talk about the quickie all the time.
Right. You know, and so
you don't
depends.
have to be all full on orgasm and like, you know,
2 hours.
2 hours and fireworks are going off every single time. I mean, there are definitely times when Alisa and I are like, we got a crazy week.
Yeah.
We have 30 minutes right now.
I'll meet you in the bedroom, get naked, let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah.
It's not a drawn out, like, oh my gosh, we got to make sure that the candles are on perfectly and the lights are on perfectly. It's just like, we're going to, and that is a tough thing. So a lot of people are like, well, I just can't get my head there. Well, the more and more you have sex, just like anything else, the more and more you pump iron, the more and more your muscles develop.
Yeah.
The more and more you have sex with your spouse, the more and more you develop. You know each other and your ebbs and your flows. And so a quickie for us isn't like, I'll just throw that away. That was just a quickie. No, it was a time where we were still very close and intimate with each other, even if it was for 3 minutes.
Yeah. And even if no orgasm happened.
Right.
Or even if it was just intimate caressing.
Right.
And it's having that conversation. Yeah. Because there are definitely times when I'm like, you know what, we've got a narrow window. I don't need to orgasm. I take a little longer to orgasm. So because
because last week you had
it was like premature orgasm, like my new phrase. I'm like, when did that happen?
Is that possible for a premature orgasm?
What we learned was desire. Like the romance, going back to our 19 questions, Alisa and I had been talking about these and how that really heightened her desire. That for her, and just having oral sex while we were doing it, I mean, it was just so quick. It was honestly like...
I mean, I don't know that it's actually a term.
No.
But it was one of those things where it had been a few days of just anticipation and stuff. And so when we were in the moment, I'm like, bam, what the heck? Like, that was like Speedy Gonzalez here. That's not my role. Like, what are we doing? But...
shatters the glass ceiling.
I know, new term. But in doing that, it's like we have these conversations. And when it becomes more normal, when it becomes as normal for a couple to talk about like what they're buying at the grocery store, when their sex life becomes as normal as talking about, you know, getting a gallon of milk, when they can create that openness and that connection in their marriage, then a lot of these problems are minimized or even avoided because you know what? If I can talk to him and be like, hey, I don't need to have an orgasm today. He's not taking that like, oh, maybe I'm not performing. Instead, it's like, all right, I know what our expectations are. Let's go.
Yeah.
It changes the dynamic in marriage when couples can get to a point where they can voice their expectations and have it be received by the other person.
My stance has always been, and Alisa as well, but whatever you want to do between you, your spouse, and God, go for it.
So, well, that kind of raises my last question. It was about God. Because there is this, what's the word? It seems like a lot of Christian couples have a lot of fear around exploring sexuality, which is a trend that you two are trying to buck, clearly. Mm-hmm. Does God care what you're doing in your bedroom?
Absolutely.
He does care.
Absolutely. Why would God not care? Like if we say that God cares about all the rest of our lives, why wouldn't he care what happens in our bedroom?
So then, but then how do you know what he wants? Like, how do you know the rules?
So fabulously enough, in the Bible is the Song of Solomon, a whole book on sex.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I had no idea.
Oh yeah.
Song of Solomon's awesome.
And it's written in very descriptive language. And I've heard a lot of commentaries on this that because it was, part of the Bible, it was written in this, more flowery language so that the young Hebrew boys could actually read it, be looking at, the descriptions and not necessarily get the sexual innuendo. But when you read it as an adult, you're like, oh yeah. Like, I understand what we're talking about with, and I don't have a Bible in front. I know that's a devotional. I'm like, I don't have a Bible in front of us. But, you want to know what God's will is, open the Bible.
Yeah.
Right? God desired husband between a man and a woman, that the two should become one. He desires that we love each other deeply. That's why there's the verse that says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, right? That sacrificial love, which doesn't just take place in the bedroom, but in marriage itself, right? So many Christians are like, well, I'll give God, okay, God, if you can help me out with my finances and if you can help me out with my kids, like that'd be great, but I'm going to handle everything that's going on in the bedroom. Well, when the bedroom's not working, maybe it's time that we as Christians said, hey, God, that's like when I prayed during the 60 Days of Sex Challenge.
Yeah, and he answered. And
he answered. Totally crazy.
Okay, so that answers half of the question for me, which is, God. It sounds like from that perspective, God is saying, you need to have sex. You need to create intimacy with your spouse, and this is the way to do it, so do it. But what about on the high end? Is there anything you're not supposed to do? Other than, I would imagine, third parties might be an answer to that. But is there anything you're not supposed to do with sex? Like, what if you want something super kinky?
We've gone back to the two of our stance is the two of you need to be in communion with one another, communication with one another about that. And then it's, again, for every couple, what are the two of you doing? Bring that to God. Be in prayer.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, third parties.
No.
That's a no-go.
Adultery,
in any type of infidelity, any, voyeurism, any of this kind of stuff. But it's seeking out the advice of your pastor. It's reading your Bible. It's saying, you know what? Is what I'm doing with my spouse bringing glory to God? Because if it's not, if it's degrading to them, if it's hurting them, that's not what God designed for your sex life.
Well, what if it's degrading to them, but they like it?
How would it be degrading? Like, what would, if they're in a situation where it's enjoyable, then is it necessarily degrading?
I don't think it's just semantics. I see your point is that it could just be a matter of semantics, but there are fetishes or sexual interests around being degraded, which would be in that case what the person wanted and could come from a communion between the partners, but one person is definitely being degraded on purpose. Where does that fit?
Again, I come back.
It's a good question.
It is. It's a great question, and I come back to that place of, if it's between you, your spouse, and God. If it's okay with you guys, you're in relationship. You're in relationship with God. You brought up rules. There's a relationship that you have with each other and with our Father. If that's where you guys are at, then that's where you're at. Again, I'm not here to bring on judgment. I'm not here to shame you or guilt you. That is not what we're here to do. Our place is to raise you up so that you are able to have that awesome sexual experience.
I am going to just piggyback on that, is that even if it's, I'm going back to this word on degrading, and ultimately that's probably not honoring. And the reason that I say that is because even if it's enjoyable in the moment, for the long-term health and success of a marriage, degrading your spouse in any way, shape, or form is not going to be honoring. Even if it's sexually stimulating in the moment, in the long term, there will be emotional repercussions of degrading one another. It's something that has the potential, and simply because it has the potential is where my concern is. It has the potential to carry on outside of the bedroom, outside of that sexual moment, and to carry on into how the two of you relate to one another.
Yeah.
And in that case, the potential for harm long-term to your marriage is so great that it's something that you have to be. I would be extremely concerned. As I'm listening to this conversation happening, I'm like, it's a slippery slope. And once you try it, it's like, what does that open the two of you up to in terms of potentially hurting each other down the road? And so I'd have to say that that's probably a no-go.
Okay. I get it. On that one, I disagree too. But
fair enough.
I just love how thoughtful you are about this. There's just this beautiful framework that the two of you have.
Thank you.
On bringing sex to a marriage in an open and a clear, honest way. It's just so lovely and refreshing.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, clearly.
Right? And I think a lot of folks just want to make it so cut and dry. It's like, it's this or it's that. And there is a lot that's happening. And it's why when we get into these situations where we share with couples who email us or call in and they want a quick answer, we can't. And even in the situations you've been giving us, sometimes it's tough to just go, it's this or it's that.
Well, that's the thing, right? When you're working with couples, you don't actually know the answer. Mm-mm. All you can do is bring people to their answer.
Right.
In the end.
And you're bringing that out. And so that's where we always share with them. We're like, man, we'd be doing a disservice if we answered this question in an email because we don't know all that's happening. So your best place to start is get on a call and book a session with Alisa for coaching.
Yeah.
So you can start working through that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, again, marriage isn't like business. And sometimes folks are just like, well, just give me the steps. And man, I would love to.
There are some steps. But then there's in the moment nuance.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's
individuality of the couple, of the two people that are the uniqueness that they each bring.
There's a book that I want you guys to read so bad and see what you think about it. So there's this sex therapist named Stan Siegel, who wrote a book called Your Brain on Sex. And I think it's groundbreaking. And I adore this guy. He is the sweetest, most thoughtful, adorable, loving guy I've ever talked to about the issues that he goes into, and he goes deep. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the stuff he says, you guys have said too. But he takes it in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
And I would love to see what you thought about it if you would read it. And then maybe we could do a follow-up.
Yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Will you do it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Guys, thanks so much. You're the best. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's it for our interview with Tony and Alisa, folks. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about these two or the courses that they teach to Christian couples, or if you just want to hear their podcast, you can find them at oneextraordinarymarriage.com. And I'll put a link to that in our show notes. And be sure to check out our sponsors today, Little Bird, the independent diamond and engagement ring experts. The best way to buy an engagement ring is with a bird's eye view. You can find them at littlebirdtoldyou.com. If you liked our show, check out our Patreon page. It's a place for fans of the show to support what we're up to and to get more of what they love with advanced access to episodes, deleted scenes, and live chats. So check it out at patreon.com/together. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to be on the show, please reach out to us via one of our platforms. You can find our website at www.together.guide. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/togethershow. Twitter and Instagram are both at together_show, or you can email me at host@together.guide. That's all for today, folks. Talk to you on Monday.